Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Connection, coming to you from Spirit and Truth Sanctuary on today, this very last day of the month of May. The transition from the week that May transitions into June has always been a pretty special week in the life of my family personally. Yesterday, May the 30th, would have been our bishop, my Uncle Earl's 95th birthday, if he were still living. And Thursday is my father, the other founder of the ministry. It will be his 84th birthday. So happy birthday in heaven and on earth to those two brothers, very special people to me. And happy birthday to anybody out there who is celebrating this week as well. On to our morning blessing. Spirit of truth, we give thanks today for our connection in this time of togetherness, for our sameness as well as our contrasts, and for the light we reflect to one another and see in one another. We give thanks for the holy that holds us and for the humanity that always brings us back to the holy. We ask that our happiness, our peace, and our joy now be woven in to the fabric of the world around us, and that it serve as nourishment to feed the heart of the collective. In the name and nature of the Christ. Amen, and so it is. Before we get to the quotes, I want to just make you aware of the fact that today I will be sharing with you in large part. I've added a few things that reference our teaching from last week, but the major chunk of the teaching today will be material that I have shared with you before. Usually when I repeat material, I try to make it something that's not very recent. I've been doing this now since 2017, which is a little unbelievable to me. So I've got quite a bit to choose from when I start going back through my past notes. And I only repeat teachings when I feel really impressed to do so, but I did today. This teaching will be one that I originally gave you just last year in August of 2021. But as we go on, I hope you'll see why I felt to repeat it today and how, as I said, it fits in with some things that I said last week. It's just like your favorite song or your favorite movie or your favorite book. Every time you see it, hear it, read it, it kind of hits a little bit differently and you find something else that you did not see before. So I'm sure and I am knowing that that's going to happen today. Yesterday was Memorial Day, and so that word and that concept were on my mind. What does it mean to memorialize someone or something? When we have a memorial service for a person, it's after they've passed on and made their transition, and we come together to remember them and to honor the life that they lived. So memorializing is remembering and honoring and being grateful for things that have happened in the past, but it's also a kind of turning the page, an ending of a particular chapter so everyone can move on to the next. When we're talking about a person, it's of course referring to everyone else's next chapter of life without the physical presence of that person. So memorializing can also mean putting an end to something. And in the conclusion of today's teaching, we're going to talk about that, some things that we need to put an end to so that we can move on to the next chapter of our lives and to the next step of our evolution as spiritual beings. So that's one connection. The other is this. Last week, as you know, I spoke about a spiritual perspective of abortion from my personal standpoint of spirituality. And part of that was the idea that if we indeed view ourselves as just smaller versions of God, or put another way, we are all part of that one mind, one creator that is God, then we not only have the power of life, but we also have power over death. We just don't always want to accept the responsibility that goes with that power. How we choose to use it is up to us, whether we use it responsibly or not. But there's no question that we as humans have the power to kill. In the world we live in, killing happens on a daily basis. Some people in our society have just chosen to live in the cognitive dissonance, which we'll also talk about a lot today, that we should leave some choices about whether to kill up to God, but in other situations, war for instance, it's perfectly acceptable for us as human beings to make the choice to kill. Side note here, there's also more than one way to kill somebody. A bullet is the fast way, but making life virtually impossible for certain groups of people to survive or be successful in any way, that is through various laws and social structures. That's another way to kill somebody, just slowly. So it's just a slower death, but it's still killing. All right, so that's neither here nor there, just something extra that I thought about when I was going over the teaching from last week that I did not say then. So this teaching I'll give today also deals with the concept of cognitive dissonance and explains fully what it is. So without further ado, I give you the teaching on the transitive property. We're going to begin with the quotes. The first from Andrew Martin. Wisdom is knowledge that is lived. I love that one. The next one is less of a quote and more of an affirmation. I will stay close to my truth. I will not allow anyone to trick me out of trusting myself or my intuition. Alex L. The next one from Amy Lee. Shining my light in the world is less about doing and more about being. The frequency that emanates from my heart and through my words will not resonate with everyone. I carry specific messages for specific people. I am here for quality interactions, quality expression, quality conversations, quality connections, and quality impact. So in other words, what she's saying is, I know I will not be everyone's cup of tea, but the people that my message does resonate with, those are going to be quality connections for me and for them. So that's a good way to look at things. Next, if we want our species to survive, if we are to find meaning in life, if we want to save the world and every sentient being that inhabits it, love is the one and only answer. Perhaps we are not yet ready to make a bomb of love, a device powerful enough to entirely destroy the hate, selfishness, and greed that now devastates the planet. However, each individual carries within them a small but powerful generator of love whose energy is waiting to be released. When we learn to give and receive this universal energy, we will have affirmed that love conquers all, is able to transcend anything and everything, because love is the quintessence of life. Albert Einstein made that quote, which shocked me. And that word he uses there, quintessence, means the most perfect or typical example of a quality, the aspect of something regarded as the intrinsic and central constituent of its character. So what Einstein is saying here is that love is the most perfect example of and the most central and vital part of life. And I wholeheartedly agree. That's going to be important to remember as we get further into the teaching today, that love is the most perfect example of, as well as the most central and vital part, the intrinsic and central characteristic of life itself. So we say things to that effect all the time. We say, without love, we're nothing. We say, love is the most important thing in life. It's all that matters. We say things like, love conquers all. Love covers all. Love covers a multitude of sins, even. We say that we would do anything for those we love. Love makes the world go round. We say all these things, and yet, listen to this last quote and feel the truth of it. We cannot pray in love, but live in hate and still think we are worshiping God. I'm going to repeat that one. We cannot pray in love, but live in hate and still think that we are worshiping God. A very similar quote to that is, we cannot pray for peace while continually continually condoning acts of violence and constantly preparing for war? Do you feel the cognitive dissonance in those two statements? Let's talk about cognitive dissonance for a moment, as I promised. Cognitive dissonance is defined as having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, or more specifically, it's when your actions conflict with what you say your beliefs are. When what you say and what you do and what you believe are not in alignment, in other words. Let me give you a few examples. Cognitive dissonance is saying you really care about the environment, you love Mother Earth, but continuing to use plastic bags instead of taking a reusable one to the grocery store. Continuing to buy cases of plastic water bottles rather than one reusable one that you can carry with you, which I decided I needed to walk my talk this morning, and I brought my own water bottle. Randy and Benny are usually very gracious enough to leave me a plastic water bottle here every time before I speak. But I'm going to make that change because I know that I need to walk my talk. Also, an example of cognitive dissonance in this area is when you just refuse to recycle because it's just too hard. It's just too hard to separate the recyclables from the other trash. So you say, but I love the earth. I'm all about caring for the environment. But if you're not doing these things, it doesn't matter how many bumper stickers on the back of your car that say love your mother with a picture of the planet on it, you don't really if you're not taking action that says you love the earth. So here's another example. Along with the extra step of how some people choose to justify or deal with their cognitive dissonance. Smoking. If you believe that smoking is harmful to your body, yet you still choose to smoke, this creates an inconsistency between your belief and your behavior. So to resolve this discrepancy, you can change or adjust your belief by saying, well, it's really not that bad for me as long as I do it in moderation, or I counterbalance it with other healthy actions like eating healthy and getting plenty of rest, exercising. So you can change your belief, or you can go on the other side and change your behavior and actually stop smoking. But as long as your belief remains that it's bad for you and you continue to do it, you will be living in a state of cognitive dissonance, which results in constant inner stress and tension. Even if it's a very low level, every time you do it, but subconsciously you're saying to yourself, I know this is really bad for me. It's a constant little low level of stress in your body. Now, the same principle is true of anything, of overeating, eating too much junk food, drinking alcohol, too much soda, too much caffeine. I'm not singling out smokers because I have no judgment about that. It's just that was a good example of if you hold a certain belief but your actions don't align with it, it's causing cognitive dissonance and stress and tension within your body, which very often leads to sickness and disease. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper and maybe hit a little closer to home. How about all those lovely American, not limited to but largely white Anglo-Saxon Bible-believing good-hearted, God-fearing Christians who either go themselves or send their teenagers or financially support some form of mission trip to, let's say, a Latin American country. And if you ask them why they are doing it, they will happily answer, because these are God's children and they are in need. They are less fortunate than me. So, of course, I support helping them to have a better life. I want to take Bibles to them or possibly other literature. I want to build them a school or dig them a well or so they can have clean water, because every human deserves what these things that we consider basic necessities of life here in America, because we are the land of the free and the home of the brave. Yet many of these same people will vote time and time again for politicians who hold as one of their main goals and have as one of their main talking points keeping the border secure so that all of these caravans of disease-ridden ne'er-do-wells drug smugglers and rapists can't get into our country and take our jobs and spread COVID and take advantage of our welfare system. So that's cognitive dissonance. Which is it? Are they all God's children, and as such deserving of the basic necessities of life, and also deserving of our help as people who can well afford to help them? And we even have a biblical mandate to do so, which is what you say right before you get on the plane or put your teenagers on the plane to go on a mission trip. Or are they drug smuggling rapists only here to cheat the system, who we must keep out of our country at any cost, which is what you say to your friends over dinner after watching cable news all day? So they're the same people. And that is what cognitive dissonance is. In their country over there, they're all God's children deserving of our help. But over here in our country, not so much. So, again, cognitive dissonance. Let's shift a little bit now and talk about something called the transitive property. Now, math was my least favorite subject in school, and many mathematical concepts elude me, but this one I get. The transitive property says basically that if A equals B and B equals C, then A must also equal C. That's just common sense. That's just logic. If A and B are equal and B and C are equal, then it stands to reason that A and C are equal as well, except when you're dealing with cognitive dissonance. When you take it out of the abstract and plug real factors into the equation, it goes something like this. So we have our A. I believe God is love, and I live my life based on a set of principles that He set forth in what I believe is His Word. Then you have your B. One of those principles is God loves us all the same, and we should love our neighbor as we love ourselves and treat everyone as we want to be treated. These are two equivalent things. Then we have C. People, all people, even people who are a different color, a different nationality, a different religion, a different sexual orientation, or have a different political affiliation from me, are the people the Bible is talking about. They are the neighbors that I should love as myself and treat as I would want to be treated, unless they break some man-made law and cross a man-made border, or are sick with a contagious disease, or are poor and need help feeding their kids, or are running from an oppressive, corrupt government in fear of their lives. Then no longer do we feel about them. Then no longer does A equal C to us. Let's come a little bit further down the street. Or if here in this country they voted for a different candidate than I did, or they believe differently about vaccines or mask mandates, et cetera, whatever you can plug in any variation of that. Then the transitive property somehow ceases to function, and even though it's pretty clear that A equals B and B equals C, it's okay for me to make a distinction and not go ahead and take the equation to its logical conclusion that A is also equal to C. Why? Cognitive dissonance. Welcome to America. I'll go back now to our last two quotes once again. We cannot pray in love but live in hate and still think we are worshiping God. We cannot pray for peace, yet continually condone acts of violence and constantly prepare for war. If we do that, in effect, we're saying, sure, A equals B and B equals C, but that's where we draw the line. We refuse to believe or to behave as if that also means A equals C. We're just going to live in cognitive dissonance indefinitely. So I think you've gotten my point by now that that's where and that's how a huge chunk of the world is living right now. But it doesn't even make logical sense. And as I pointed out, it defies the laws of mathematics and is therefore not sustainable. We're not going to be able to go on forever living like this. So how do we deal with it down on our everyday life level? You might be saying to yourself right about now, I don't have anything to do with preparing for war. I have no say in that. So how can I help? What am I supposed to do about it? Well, as we've talked about before, we are all connected, and every little decision you make in your individual life eventually ripples out and contributes to the collective consciousness. So the best way each of us can help is to make sure we are not one of those people living in a state of cognitive dissonance. We can make sure that as much of the time as possible, our beliefs, the words we speak, the ideals we give lip service to are actually in alignment with our actions. Okay, I'm going to read now from a piece by Brian Scott called Seeking Unity. Because if we say that's what we want, if we want unity, then we have to make sure to take actions that are leading to unity. And the way this article is structured also falls in line with our earlier discussion of cognitive dissonance and the transitive property by laying it out in that formula. If this is what we believe, and if this is what we want, then these are the actions we must take. We've got to make sure that we don't stop in the middle of the equation and only acknowledge that A equals B and B equals C. We got to follow all the way through and also make that last connection between A and C. Okay, Brian Scott says, how can we as seekers seek unity within ourselves and with others when we live in a society that holds such conflicting truths and worldviews? If we believe that all beings are portions of the same creator and creation, and that all within that creation know this is a given, and if we believe that the light of the creator shines within each entity, then how do we, as spiritual seekers, find within ourselves the ability to seek unity with others around us when there seems to be so much division and disillusionment, separation, and anger that so many now feed into regularly? There seem to be so many now whose beliefs are diametrically opposed to each other. So yes, that's the question. How do we give and receive love freely to these? How do we open our hearts in acceptance to those who have no desire to accept us? This is the very heart of the seeming illusion of separation, and an illusion it is, for we are all ultimately one. And it is the spiritual seeker's great challenge, goal, and path to find love in the moment, first inside and for yourself, and then for the other. Speaking of the other, they need not be automatically thought of as the enemy. As a society, it is quite possible to use differences as a catalyst, much in the same way an individual would. To use these discordant ideas that run counter to your own, these differences in perception, as a means of integrating into wholeness such that harmony, to one degree or another, emerges between people. Different viewpoints need not always produce only strife, turmoil, and violence. The opposite of integration is fragmentation, which is what is prevalent in our society now. Fragmentation is what happens when that which has not been processed, understood, and loved within yourself becomes reflected in some other self, and then you react to it negatively. Okay, time out. Whew, that's a whole bunch. His writing is a little convoluted, so let me break it down and provide an interpretation in layman terms for you. He's saying that differences between people, when people hold different worldviews or have different priorities and values, it can go one of two ways. We have a choice. We can use those differences to our advantage and learn to integrate all of them into one common collective, or we can let them separate us and become fragmented, which is largely what we're doing right now. And he's saying this fragmentation happens most often when we see characteristics in others or things that they're dealing with that are actually unhealed, unloved, unseen, unrecognized, unprocessed parts of us. That's why we want to distance ourselves from them, because the things we see in them that we think are wrong or bad many times is just a reflection of the stuff inside us that we haven't dealt with and don't want to look at. So instead of integrating, processing, understanding, working on, loving, etc., we reject, we push away, we make them the other. Thus, collectively, as a society, we are fragmented because so many of us individually are fragmented. So stay with me. Let's go back to Brian. I love the way he talks about this here as he explains that when we face someone who is different from us, we have the choice to collide with them and fragment, or to connect with them and integrate. He says, those reflections, when looked at from a different perspective, offer an invitation for growth and a leaving behind of our old, outgrown containers of thought, because the light that the creation is made of shines within each of us. But often, when we forget that separation from each other is just an illusion, we find it difficult to accept that some shine differently or in a different manner than we do. It's at this point that the true seeker must find within him or herself the ability to foster the unity that exists in all entities you see as external to yourself, even those who seem to be diametrically opposed to your perception of reality. For we are all one. We are all ultimately on the same path. We are all seeking in our own way to move beyond separation and find, even if only in small moments, harmony with those around us. Beginning with yourself, there is much that you can do to find peace and to share love with everyone around you. For within yourself, you contain the entire universe. Within yourself, you contain the same qualities as every other person on this earth, both the positive and the negative. For each of us is only a small part of the one Creator. There is nothing else but the one Creator. So if you, in your own being, can find a way of accepting a quality in another, even one that seems derogatory or disharmonious to you and your current belief system, as a quality that is potentially also in yourself, then you have taken the first step of harmonizing your own being with itself, with the Creator, and with any other person you will ever meet. Through either connection or collision, every person on planet Earth has abundant opportunities to come face to face with the perception of others and groups of others, to find in them a part of themselves and to either accept or reject it. So I think what he's saying here is, even when you come across a person who you believe to be nothing like you, you have to understand that you have the capacity to be like them, and they, in turn, have the capacity to be like you, because we're all just different aspects of God. Whatever that other person is, whether you like it or approve of it or not, you have the potential to be that as well. Okay. So I want to go back to a portion of what he said and relate it to the lyrics of a song that Pastor Brandy sings around here. He says, we are all seeking in our own way to move beyond separation and find, even if only in small moments, harmony with those around us. So the song, of course, if you haven't guessed by now, is the gift of acceptance. That part that says, we all want the same things in life. We want peace and love and prosperity. But can we give up our need to be right? Give the world a present. Give the gift of your acceptance. Okay? So Brian Scott is saying that is that moving beyond separation is what we're all seeking. Why? Because separation doesn't feel right to us. We know somehow we're supposed to be living in unity with each other. So living in cognitive dissonance it's not a part of what our spirit is. So we feel uncomfortable when we're there, even if we don't really realize it. So that is a key concept to grasp. We're all seeking the same things basically, but although we all want the same things, We often choose to get there in very different ways via very different paths, and that's okay. The way we can use our differences, the way that we can merge all of these divergent paths to the same place, according to the song, is by honoring each other's choices, which is what Brian Scott is saying as well. And one of the quickest ways to get to the place where you can honor someone else's path or choice is to recognize that they just want the same things that you do. And it's our commonality that we need to be focusing on rather than our divergent paths. But that's difficult. That's very difficult in real life because, as my brother often says, none of us is really completely objective. It's impossible because we all have biases and filters. To quote one of his sermons, he said, at some point, it's not about who's right and wrong. That's even a part of the song. We could argue all day about who's right and wrong. That's really not getting us anywhere. It's about stepping back and saying, if I want to get to that John 4 Jesus, which he had mentioned earlier in his sermon, which was the part of the scripture where Jesus comes to the woman and he's telling her that, look, you don't have to come to my temple and I don't have to come to your mountain because worship is not about where you are. It's about that you are worshiping in spirit and in truth. So in order to get there, to that place, what he's referring to as the John 4 Jesus, he said, then I've got to recognize that I have some biases. I have some prejudices. I've got some subjectivity in my mind. I've got some filters that I'm working with. And until I can say, Holy Ghost, help me, take my filters away, I will never see objectively. So when we do get to the place where we can ask that of the Holy Spirit, how? How does he help us? Well, that answer is the same one it always is. It's the same answer Albert Einstein told us in one of the quotes that I started with. It is one word, love. Everything always comes back to love. Let's go back to Brian Scott for a moment and see what he has to say about the role of love in society and how we can use it to integrate and connect, as well as what happens when we don't. He says, love is grand central station for the integration of humankind. We must always be asking ourselves these questions. Number one, is love contained within this viewpoint that I hold? Number two, is love contained within this relationship or in the way I'm relating to this person? Number three, is love contained within the intentions I hold when I approach this discussion or this topic? To answer these, we must first ask, what is love? Both in the abstract and in the lived, embodied experience. Often, people use the word love casually, but with conviction, without stopping and using the mental processes available to them to look inward and ask this, the most important question a person can ask himself. What precisely is love? What does it mean to freely give it? What does it mean for love to be utterly without condition? Am I truly loving those with whom I disagree? Am I loving those I deem as following after the darkness or acting in harmful ways towards society and its well-being? All right, going back to last week's teaching for a moment now, if I am strictly anti-abortion, am I approaching those who think it should be a woman's choice with love? Or if I'm pro-choice, am I approaching those who feel like it's murder with love? Approaching everything and everyone with love is such a great concept. It's such a lovely theory. But in real life situations, it's sometimes very difficult to live out. Back to Brian. In the seeking of unity, love is the yardstick by which everything is measured. The seeker does not come to unity except through love, and it must be extended even to the category of people the seeker would describe as the other. The truth is, no one is merely what thoughts they may passionately and vociferously support. Okay, remember, beliefs can and do change. So if you're viewing someone as only their beliefs, that is an incorrect or an incomplete perception of them. Okay, so he's saying that people are not just their beliefs, nor are they merely their nationality, political affiliation, or any number of other superficial features. The other before you is the one in its entirety. The seeker must learn daily the practice of keeping the heart open. Love is already present in each of us, even in the other, because it is love that created all there is. The seeker's job is not to manufacture love, but to remove the blockages within the self which close the heart. Dear seeker, are you doing this work? Or is love bandied about in your vocabulary without honestly examining those ways in which you impede, obscure, or confuse love? There's no judgment, for each of us learns from a very young age how to close our hearts and how to block love, and then how to justify those actions. Some of us never move beyond this level, but unity will never be reached until this level has been risen above. When you view the other with compassion, you begin the journey on the road to unity. This part's important. That unity does not require agreement with the truths or claims or statements of other people. It does not ask you to acquiesce to anything that doesn't resonate with your being. Unity balances love with wisdom, but wisdom without love leads only to separation. And for all who seek unity, it is precisely this illusion of separation you wish to dissolve. The name of that dissolving agent, or the active ingredient in that dissolving agent, is love itself. The journey to unity is a long road, one you will walk long beyond even your time here on earth. But it is here, in this earthly realm and experience, that you will be the most tested, the most challenged, and brought to your knees. Know that by turning your attention to love, you are not spinning your wheels with no purpose. You are not expending your energy without direction, nor are you alone. When you tune yourself to love, great forces within the universe will align themselves with you to support your effort and to cheer you on and to inspire you. For in tuning yourself to love, you tune yourself to the universe itself. When you are in alignment with the Creator, the illusions that have imprisoned your mind and kept you in a state of suffering and separation and cognitive dissonance begin to loosen their grip as your wings spread to take you to higher and higher levels of vibration and frequency. When you cannot see yourself in the other, unity seems out of reach and impossible, especially when you consider all the various divergent paths and selves that exist in this illusion of separation. But don't see your uniqueness or differentness as a fortress to keep others out. See it instead as an open market where the free exchange of ideas, the gift of intelligent discussion, and ultimately the giving and receiving of love and understanding can flourish. Open your arms to the other side without the expectation of changing their beliefs. When you begin to see yourself in the other and as the other, when you can walk in the other's shoes, then you will know and understand that each other you encounter is just another strand of thread in the amazing and indescribably beautiful tapestry that is the one. Whew! So I think I'm going to need a sip of my water after all that. That was a little thick to get through, but beautifully expressed, I think. And to me, again, the main point was that even as separated as we seem to be at the moment, separation is an illusion. But we can choose to remain in that illusion. We can choose to seek the truth of unity. And we do that by how we choose to view others, especially those who are very different from us. Each other self we come into contact with, we have a choice. We can choose to collide, or we can choose to find a way to connect. And the best way to connect is through love, which, as I've said, so many times is simple, but not always easy. In closing, I want us to remember something else that my brother says often. The only question that's worth asking when it comes to religion is it working? So I ask you today, if your religion is part of what's keeping you separate from others, if your religion is causing you to get all the way over here on one side of the spectrum and believe that the other side is wrong, if your religion is creating violence of any kind, physical or emotional, then is it working? I'm going to end by reading a piece by Andrew Martin about how all this separation consciousness and feeling like you have to be on one side or the other is a system of thought that's fading away. When you get up on a higher frequency, that doesn't exist. That is a part of our world that's in the process of passing away. It is in the past, and it's time for us, if we are truly seeking unity and oneness, as we say we are, to close the door on that reality and to step into a new one. It is time for us to memorialize that way of thinking, be grateful for it, honor it, but know that we're moving beyond it now. And so that we can finally, as we do this, we put it to rest and we move on to where we need to be, which is unity. So Andrew Martin says this: only in this earthly realm of duality do we deal with the binary choice of either or, either this or that. When we move into a higher frequency, there is always a third option. In the quantum reality, it is possible for 1 + 1 to equal 3. If you allow yourself to stay present and say, actually, I don't prefer either one of these options, a third option will present itself. Another way will be revealed. When you don't choose the old thing, when you refuse to open the door that you have already shut behind you, that you have already memorialized, when the past comes knocking and you say, no, I'm not choosing past behaviors or reactions anymore. Actually, what I'm doing is processing my past and integrating it. When you instead say, finally and completely, I am putting a period to the sentence of my past and I am letting it go. I am never looking back and I will never return to that version of me. So if you want to find me, don't go looking for me in old places and patterns, because I don't live there anymore. In the collective, the paradigm of the either-or choice is not the way anymore. It's old news, black and white, good or bad, masculine or feminine. No, I am both masculine and feminine. I am both the hero and the villain. I am the beginning and the end. I am all. And when I accept the fullness of all that I am and integrate it into my reality, that's what opens the third way, a new possibility. A world where I am no longer forced to choose between the lesser of what I consider two evils. This third way only opens up when we don't take the bait and go back to our old patterns and ways of behaving. The third way opens up when we decide not to choose sides anymore, because when each of us is all of who we are, it is impossible to pick a side. When each of us is living in our full I amness, there is only one side. When we reach this level, we change our vibration, which then changes the reality of our physical experience. Wow. So let's distill this whole teaching down to its simplest form by going back to our transitive property. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. If God is love, we are all corporately and collectively part of God, then we are all love and lovable, and no matter how different we are from each other, we are all deserving of each other's love. Amen. Thank you for sharing this time with me today. We will see you tomorrow night at 6:30 for our continuing study series on Brene Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection. And we will also see you on Sunday back in the house. And Pastor D.E. and Brandy and the family will be back then as well. We look forward to seeing you then. Until then.